In the heart of Paris, inside a luxury hotel, two very different worlds are about to collide. Lucie is a discreet, multilingual receptionist with stories silence has shaped. Hervé is an arrogant millionaire, accustomed to power but haunted by his own emptiness. When an unexpected moment of humiliation sparks an unlikely conversation, both are forced to drop their masks and face the unknown in each other's eyes. What can be born when pride meets empathy? How far can one word take you when it is spoken as equals? Follow the story to the end. Hit like, subscribe so you don't miss the next installment, and explore more stories like this one. Drop a comment. What language surprised you today? The atrium of the Hôtel Vert de Vie in Paris buzzed with the comings and goings of international guests. Gold-framed mirrors reflected hurried travelers, while the scent of luxury disinfectant tried, with little success, to mask the morning shift's stress. Behind the reception desk, Lucie observed the movement. Her green eyes, subtly lined with pencil, scanned the queue with professional detachment, almost invisible. To many, she was just another anonymous face in the hallways of luxury. Then the revolving doors ejected a man in a custom-tailored burgundy suit. His walk was a declaration of presence. Hervé Moncler, tech tycoon, accustomed to being the center of attention. He adjusted his wristwatch, surveyed the lobby with disdain, and, without removing his sunglasses, approached the desk where Lucie waited. Hervé radiated impatience. His fingers drummed the marble as he eyed Lucie up and down, as if she were a minor obstacle between him and his presidential suite. "Good morning, mademoiselle," he began in a French laden with haughtiness. "It's 9:10 and my check-in was at 9:04. This is unacceptable. Efficiency is expected in an establishment like this, not carelessness." Lucie kept her smile, professional, inscrutable. Without blinking, she tapped something into the computer as the millionaire sighed loudly. "Monsieur Moncler, je vous présente mes excuses. Le système est un peu lent ce matin," she replied, her voice soft, almost honeyed. "Soyez bien sûr, toujours des excuses." Hervé rolled his eyes, raising his voice for other guests to hear. "C'est incroyable, cette incompétence. On ne trouve plus de vrais professionnels à Paris." The silence that followed was heavy, like a storm cloud about to burst. Hervé knew the weight of his words. He was used to humiliation and being served, but something in Lucie's gaze was different. Not fear, not submissive. Calm, a calm that unsettled him. Lucie took a deep breath, and with a serenity that cut through the air replied in Spanish, "Disculpe, señor Moncler. Sé que el protocolo es importante, pero le aseguro que haré todo lo posible para ayudarlo." Hervé's eyes widened in surprise. Before he could react, Lucie continued in Italian, "Prego, signore, un attimo di pazienza. Lo stiamo sistemando." The millionaire swallowed hard. People around began to whisper. Lucie, unfazed, went on in German, "Es tut mir leid, Herr Moncler. Wir tun unser Bestes, Ihnen zu helfen." Hervé felt the blood rush to his face. He wasn't a man to be challenged, much less by a receptionist. But Lucie wasn't finished. She offered a faint smile, and finally, in Japanese, "Shenshi arimasen, monkureru yang, sugu ni taiyong itashimasu." Hervé Moncler stood frozen. He, who considered himself the epitome of global sophistication, had just been outshone by a woman who switched languages like gloves. His wounded pride throbbed, but something deeper stirred. Involuntary respect mixed with shame. The tension between them was palpable. Yet Lucie didn't seem triumphant. Her gaze sent a silent message. True elegance isn't in power, but in how you wield it. The chapter ends with the millionaire stunned, guests intrigued, and Lucie unflappable, waiting for the next move in this battle of egos. A murmur spread through the lobby like a wave. Hervé's cheeks burned, not from anger but from embarrassment. He had intended to dominate, to remind everyone of his place, and now he'd been schooled in 5 languages by a woman whose name he didn't even know. Lucie's co-workers exchanged glances. A few smiled behind their hands, others looked at her with newfound respect. The guests, some affluent, others merely curious, leaned in, eager for the next act in this unexpected drama. Hervé coughed, adjusting his tie. His voice, now lower, carried none of its earlier bluster. C'est bon. Je n'ai pas le temps pour ça. Ma suite, s'il vous plaît. His French was softer, almost conciliatory. But Lucie wasn't finished. In perfect, unaccented English, she met his eyes directly. Of course, Mr. Montclair. Allow me one moment and I'll personally show you to your suite. Her tone wasn't triumphant. It was smooth, polished, and utterly professional. Hervé hesitated. He wanted to snarl, to remind her of his status, but the crowd's expectant gaze pinned him down. He nodded curtly, seething inside. As Lucie processed the check-in, the curious guests began to disperse, but the energy in the room had shifted. The balance of power for a fleeting moment had tilted, and Hervé Montclair, billionaire, felt something he rarely experienced. He was no longer in control. Lucie handed him the keycard, her fingers brushing his for the briefest instant. "Have a pleasant stay, sir. If you require anything, I am at your service." Her smile, warm but cool, said everything. Hervé took the card, muttered a barely audible "merci," and turned toward the elevators. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not just the way people looked at him, but the way he looked at himself. And Lucie, standing behind the desk, watched him go with the satisfaction of someone who had just turned the tables. Silently, elegantly, and without a single word too many. Absolutely. Here is chapter 3 of our story, now centered on the unexpected consequences of Lucie's multilingual grace and the emotional tremors shaking Hervé Montclair's carefully constructed world. At the end, you'll find 3 vivid image prompts suited for visual translation of this turning point. Chapter 3, The Walk of Silence. The gilded elevator doors closed with a soft chime. Hervé Montclair did not look back, but the reflection in the polished brass showed a man who was, for the first time in years, uncertain of his next move. The silence, richer than any suite, pressed in around him. On the 27th floor, the corridor stretched, carpet swallowing his every step. He inhaled the perfumed air, but the familiar ache of victory was absent. Instead, an unfamiliar weight settled in his chest, a mix of annoyance, curiosity, and something indefinably close to admiration. Who was that woman? A question no amount of background checks or social media algorithms could answer. Hervé was accustomed to cataloguing people, their fears, ambitions, weaknesses, yet in Lucie's eyes he had glimpsed none of these. Only calm, only confidence. Was it possible, after years of unshaken certainty, to meet someone who refused to be categorized? Inside the suite, Hervé poured himself a cognac. The view of Paris unfurled beneath him, but his thoughts were miles away, anchored to the moment Lucie had shattered his illusion of absolute control. He recalled her voice, fluid as water, shifting effortlessly from language to language, each more elegant than the last. The ease with which she spoke marked not just fluency, but a worldliness he had not anticipated. He set the glass down, remembering the whispers, not just among the guests, but the other staff. The way they looked at her, respect, camaraderie, a hint of something deeper. Who was she? His mind reached for old instincts, research, surveillance, leverage. But the habit felt hollow. For once, perhaps, the answer was not an advantage to be seized, but a mystery to be respected. Lucie's silence is loud. Downstairs, the rhythm of the lobby continued. Lucie's hands moved deftly across the keyboard, checking in other guests, answering calls. But the air around her was different. The colleagues who once treated her as just another face now cast sidelong glances, part awe, part questions unspoken. A young concierge, Antoine, slid beside her. "That was incredible, Lucie," he murmured, eyes wide. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "He just wanted his room, Antoine. No need for a spectacle." But Antoine was not so easily silenced. "You stood up to him. You didn't even raise your voice. That's something else." Lucie's fingers stilled. She thought of the languages she had learned out of necessity, not pride. Of the cities she had wandered, invisible in the crowds, always watching, always listening. To learn was to survive. To speak was to reclaim a little power in a world that preferred silence. But she felt no triumph. Only the quiet knowledge that today, for a brief moment, she had not been erased. It was not a victory. It was simply being seen. Hervé's dilemma. Back in his suite, Hervé picked up the phone. He could call the manager, demand an apology, maybe even have Lucie reprimanded. It would be so easy. But the thought soured as an image flashed in his mind, the delicate strength in Lucie's expression as she met his challenge, unflinching. He had spent his life collecting accolades, investments, admirers, always the one to set the rules. For the first time, he wondered if those rules were worth as much as he believed. The Paris skyline blurred. His chest tightened. He was Hervé Moncler, and yet, for now, that name felt almost foreign. Meanwhile, in the lobby, the evening shift arrived. The lights dimmed, deepening the luxury into something softer, more intimate. Guests drifted to the bar, to dinner, to whispered conversations. Lucie gathered her purse, another day done. As she turned to leave, a man approached, elegant, watchful, a foreign journalist perhaps, or a businessman with quieter ambitions. He smiled at her, then in hesitant French asked, "Were you working earlier?" Lucie looked at him, searching his face for motive. "Yes, I'm always working," she replied, and in her tone there was neither warmth nor coldness, only truth. But inside, something small and fragile threatened to unfurl. Hope. Morning light spilled through Hervé's suite, painting harsh, impatient lines across the marble floor. He had not slept well. The city for once blurred beneath him, irrelevant. He traced the rim of his coffee cup, the bitter steam curling up like unanswered questions. Who was he, if not the man who always got what he wanted? The thought rankled. He scrolled through messages, boardroom demands, sycophantic greetings, but none were urgent. None were real. For the first time, Hervé Moncler felt irrelevant in his own life. He stood, paced, stopped at the window. Paris glittered, indifferent. Why did it matter, this silent little victory of a hotel clerk? But it did matter, because Lucie had done what no one ever dared. She had made him feel seen, not as a brand, not as a fortune, but as a man who could be surprised. The walk of discomfort. He dressed, sharp, precise, armor restored, and took the elevator down. The lobby smelled of fresh lilies and ambition. Hervé scanned for her, almost unaware he was doing it. She wasn't at the front desk. A young man, Antoine, smiled nervously at his approach. "Monsieur Moncler, how may I assist?" Hervé waved him off. "I'm looking for your colleague, Lucie." Antoine hesitated. "She's on her break, sir. Would you like to leave a message?" Hervé frowned, caught. "No." He sat in the lounge, ordered an espresso, and watched the comings and goings. The hotel was a stage, but he was no longer center stage. This waiting was new. The realization rattled him more than any boardroom ambush. Lucio's sanctuary. Lucie sat on a tiny balcony behind the hotel's grand kitchens, an employee's secret space hidden from guests. She held a paperback, the spine cracked and sun-bleached, but her eyes were not on the pages. She thought of 5 languages, 6 cities, 7 lives lived in quiet anonymity. Lucie had never wanted attention. She simply wanted respect. Her phone buzzed. A message from the front desk. "Montclair guy is looking for you." Lucie sighed. The game was not over then. She considered not returning. She could finish her shift, walk out, and disappear into the city. But something, pride, curiosity, stubbornness, made her stand up, brush off her skirt, and head inside. The encounter that was not supposed to happen. Hervé spotted her as she re-entered the lobby. She walked with quiet assurance, as if she belonged here everywhere without apology. He stood, intercepting her path. "A moment, please," he said in French, but softer now. Lucie paused, her face calm, expectant. "You know my name," Hervé said. Lucie nodded. "Yes, Mr. Montclair, you are a guest here. And yet, I do not know yours." Her smile was brief, just a flicker. Lucie, just Lucie. Hervé hesitated. He had planned, perhaps, to explain himself or demand an explanation. But her simplicity disarmed him. I owe you an apology," he managed, the words unfamiliar, awkward on his tongue. Lucie's eyes widened just for a second. "That's not necessary," she replied in English, her voice gentle. "I don't play games, Mr. Moncler. I just do my job." Hervé swallowed. How many years since he had heard a truth so simply spoken, ripples and reverberations. Silence stretched between them, thin and electric. Guests moved past, invisible, irrelevant. Hervé searched for words that would bridge the gap, between apology and understanding, between power and vulnerability. Lucie waited, still, patient, not giving an inch, not demanding more. A chime, the elevator, a bell, a reminder of the world, separated them. Hervé unexpectedly smiled, a real smile, not a calculated one. "Lucie," he said, "perhaps you would join me for a drink, after your shift." She did not answer immediately. She looked at him, really looked, and saw for the first time not the tycoon, not the bully, but a man uncertain of his place. Lucie hesitated. "We'll see," she said, and left him standing there. The air between them changed forever. At the end of her shift, Lucie lingered behind the reception desk, rearranging pens and straightening brochures, busy work to avoid a quiet exit. She could feel the weight of anticipation, the knowledge that Hervé Moncler's invitation might not be empty. Yet she hesitated. She had played roles her whole life, receptionist, translator, invisible observer, but never herself, not with someone like him. That was the risk, to be truly seen. Across the lobby in the ornate lounge, Hervé watched the entrance. His usual confidence was replaced by a tense alertness, fingers circling his untouched whiskey, eyes flicking to every passing figure. He was not used to waiting, especially not for a woman who had in a single morning cracked the shell of his habitual disdain. When she appeared, out of uniform, her simple navy dress, her hair freed from its pins, he almost didn't recognize her. She walked as quietly as she spoke, but now there was no desk between them. Hervé stood. "You came," he said, and it was not a question. Lucie glanced at the empty chair beside him, then at the bartender, busy with another guest. "One drink," she said, sliding into the chair, smooth, controlled. She crossed her legs, her eyes on the city lights outside, not on him. "Tell me," she said in French, "what you really want." The directness made Hervé blink. He was accustomed to negotiation, not confession. He studied her profile, her quiet strength, the way she neither shrank nor sought attention. "I don't know," he admitted, surprising even himself. "Perhaps to understand something I cannot name." Lucie allowed herself a small smile, not mocking, just knowing. "People like you rarely ask for understanding," she said in Italian, softer now. Hervé's lips quirked. "Maybe that's the problem." A waiter appeared. Hervé ordered for them both. Whiskey, neat. Lucie didn't protest. She sipped, eyes closing for half a breath, savoring the bite. "You could have ignored me," she said, switching to English, her voice lower, private. "You could have erased the moment." Hervé sighed. "I tried," he confessed, German slipping in, testing her. She answered effortlessly, matching his tone, his challenge. "But you are here, Herr Moncler. Not at the summit, not with your lawyers. Here." The words hung, electric. There was no audience now, just two people, each locked in their own armor, each drawn inexplicably to the crack in the other's facade. "Tell me about yourself," Hervé asked, abandoning pretense. Lucie tilted her head, considering honesty, considering risk. "I grew up on trains," she began, eyes distant. "Between countries, languages, identities, I learned early that belonging is a luxury, not a right." Hervé listened, genuinely curious, a state he had almost forgotten. He spoke of his own childhood, boarding schools, family expectations, the crushing weight of legacy. For the first time, they talked not as guest and staff, but as equals, two travelers shaped by solitude, by the need to prove something, if only to themselves. The conversation wandered. Paris at dawn, books that changed them, the loneliness of crowds. Each revelation was a thread, drawing them closer, tightening the silence between confessions. When the glasses were empty, Lucie stood. She thanked him, in Japanese this time, a playful private echo of their first encounter. He returned the gesture, hesitantly, honestly. They parted without a promise, without a plan, but the door was open, just a crack. Dawn found Hervé Montclair wide awake in his suite, the city's heartbeat muted behind thick curtains. Sleep had eluded him, his mind restless with fragments of conversation, Lucie's guarded honesty, moments he could not, would not forget. He had lived decades believing solitude was a choice, an indulgence for those who shaped empires. But last night, for the first time, solitude tasted of something emptier. Across Paris, Lucie walked through the still sleepy streets, coffee in hand, her breath curling into the crisp morning air. She had replayed the lounge encounter a dozen times, the unspoken stakes, the brief truce between two worlds. She felt neither victorious nor defeated, but unsettled, as if some internal balance had shifted. By mid-morning, the Hôtel Vert de Vie lapsed into its usual rhythm. Discreet efficiency, muted laughter, the scent of lilies replaced with jasmine. Lucie returned to her post, her professionalism flawless, yet her colleagues sensed a change. Antoine, ever curious, handed her a message, a note, handwritten, delivered at the crack of dawn. "Lucie, please meet me at the rooftop terrace at noon. It's important. Hervé." Her fingers trembled. She folded the note, tucked it away. The rooftop was reserved for select guests, another gesture of luxury designed to impress and divide. What now? At 11:50, she took the private elevator. The ascent was silent, pressurized, a metaphor for the invisible distance she still felt. The terrace was empty except for Hervé, seated at a low table set for two. Beyond, Paris sprawled, rooftops silvered by midwinter light. He stood as she approached, his usual confidence tempered, eyes searching for clues. "Thank you for coming," he said, in English, a language of truce, if not peace. Lucie nodded, bracing herself for another game. Hervé gestured to a chair, poured tea from a silver pot, then surprised her by not speaking immediately. He stared at the city, the silence between them heavy, expectant. After a while, he asked quietly, "Do you like this hotel?" Lucie hesitated. "It's a beautiful place." He nodded, sipped his tea, then suddenly shifted topic, his tone careful. "I'm building something. A chain of hotels, personalized, global, but with a soul. I want guests to feel known, not just served." He looked up. "I want you to help me do it, to be much more than a receptionist." Lucie's breath caught. The city blurred at the edge of her vision. She had expected a dinner, a confession, perhaps even a clumsy courtship. Not this, an offer that unsettled every careful line she had drawn. "I have my life here," she managed, her voice soft but firm. Hervé's jaw tightened. "I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm asking you to build something new, with me." A dozen questions flashed in her mind. Why now? Why me? What world is this man offering? But deeper than the questions, something else stirred. Curiosity, uncertainty, an old longing to be part of something bigger than herself. Then, quietly, he added, "You understand people in a way I never will. You belong nowhere and everywhere. I've spent my life building walls. Maybe you can help me build bridges." The wind picked up. Paris gleamed beneath them. For a moment, both sat in silence, exposed. Hervé, vulnerable in his honesty. Lucie, torn between the safety of routine and the lure of the unknown. She closed her eyes, let the city's heartbeat wash over her. When she opened them, she spoke, not in French, but in her mother tongue. A language Hervé didn't know, couldn't recognize, couldn't decode. He frowned. "I don't understand." She looked directly at him. "Exactly. This is the real work, Monsieur Montclair. Not translation. Understanding." She stood. Hervé watched, silent, as she walked to the terrace's edge. The city lay before her, limitless, possible, dangerous. She smiled, bittersweet. "Let me think about it." They both knew the offer had landed, an open door between their two worlds, and nothing would ever be quite the same. Lucie walked away from the rooftop, her pulse a steady, unfamiliar thrum in her chest. The Paris air was cold, but her skin burned with the aftershock of the offer. Build something new. With me. The words repeated in her mind, each echo softer, heavier, more complex. She didn't return to the reception desk. Instead, she slipped out through the service entrance, needing movement, distance. The city swallowed her, its noises, horns, heels on cobblestone, distant laughter, filling the silence inside her. She wandered without a destination, past patisseries and antiques galleries, across bridges and through narrow alleys, as if she could walk away from the choice looming in her mind. Hervé, meanwhile, sat alone on the terrace long after she left, tea cold, the city unfurling beneath him. He had expected a negotiation, a hesitation, maybe even a refusal. But Lucie's final words, "Let me think about it," had been neither acceptance nor denial. He had opened a door, and she had walked through it, leaving him alone in the sunlight, wondering about the shape of bridges he knew nothing about. "You understand people in a way I never will." The truth of that sentence settled in him, uneasy, fragile. He wasn't used to needing anyone's understanding, let alone offering his own. Yet the memory of Lucie's quiet, unyielding presence haunted him, sharper than any business success. What did it mean to build a world with someone who saw through every wall? Lucie ended her wandering at a tiny cafe on the Seine, a place where she had sometimes read in the mornings before the city woke. She placed her palms on the cold marble table, inhaled deeply, and closed her eyes. Her phone buzzed against the table. "Antoine. Will you be back for your shift?" She stared at the message, then replied simply, "Not today." She turned off the phone, silencing the world. For the first time in years, Lucie allowed herself to dream. Not with nostalgia or regret, but with a bold, unsettling clarity. Build something new. The offer meant leaving behind the invisibility she had cultivated, the safety of being just another face in the grand machine. It meant stepping into the unknown, partnered, exposed, indispensable. But it also meant power, real power, the chance to translate not just words but relationships, to shape spaces where belonging was not a privilege, but a promise, to help a man who had spent his life building walls finally learn to build bridges. She thought back to the rooftop, to the brief vulnerability in Hervé's eyes. For all his wealth, for all his bravado, he was, in that moment, just a man asking for help, asking to be seen, understood, perhaps even redeemed. The dream simmered inside her, fragile and dangerous. She walked to the river's edge, leaned against the balustrade, and watched the water, dark, restless, ceaseless. It wasn't about money or status or even adventure. It was about respect and the rare, frightening possibility of being truly known for who she was. Hervé, pacing his suite, tried to distract himself with plans and projections, but the silence was no longer a comfort. He went to the window, stared out at the city's rhythm, and for the first time wondered if he had ever really belonged anywhere. If Lucie said yes, what would that mean for him? If she said no, what would it mean for them both? He called down to the desk, asked for her apartment address, then hung up the phone before the receptionist could answer. No. This was not the way. He would not force, would not invade. He would wait. And for once, Hervé Moncler understood what it meant to be powerless, to hope. Night fell. The city's lights flickered alive, golden and uncertain. Lucie walked slowly home, her mind quieter now, her path a little straighter. The door to her tiny apartment clicked shut behind her. She poured a glass of wine, sat on the windowsill and watched the skyline. Build something new. With me. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine it, not as an employee, not as a translator, but as an equal, partner, builder, guide. The dream was terrifying, and in its terror, she felt a whisper of joy. Lucie slept fitfully, the weight of the dawn pressing against her eyelids. When the sun finally climbed above the rooftops, she woke with a clarity that surprised her, as if the answer had been whispered by the city itself. She dressed simply, no uniform, no armor, just Lucie, and walked through the emptying streets toward the Hôtel Vert de Vie. her heart steady, her path certain. Hervé, too, had not slept. He sat in the lounge, coffee gone cold, the newspaper untouched beside him. He watched the lobby entrance, willing her to appear, willing the world to bend just once in her favor. And when she did walk in ordinary clothes, with quiet determination in her eyes, he felt something in his chest loosen. Relief, fear, hope, all tangled together. She crossed the empty space between them and sat down. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Lucie broke the silence, her voice soft but firm. "I've thought about your offer." Hervé nodded, waiting, his hands still around his coffee cup. "I have conditions," she said, switching to English, a language that belonged to both of them, but one native to neither. Hervé smiled faintly. "Of course." Lucie leaned forward, her fingers interlaced. She had prepared for this moment, but now, face to face, the words felt different, bolder, more real. First, no more humiliation of anyone. "The way you spoke to me that first day, it never happens, not to anyone, not in your new world, no walls, only bridges." Hervé listened, truly listened. He did not argue, did not deflect. He simply nodded. It was less a concession than an understanding. "I promise." "Second," Lucie continued, "I work with you, not for you. Equal partners, equal voices. I am not your translator. I am your colleague." Done. She had wondered if he would balk at this, but his eyes held only respect. Lucie hesitated, then spoke the third condition, the hardest one, the one she had wrestled with all night. "And when this project is finished, if it is finished, I walk away on my own terms. No regrets, no debts, no goodbyes. Just my life and my choice." For the first time, Hervé flinched. The thought of her leaving already was a shadow he had not considered. But he understood. The fear of being trapped, of losing herself again, he could see it in her eyes, could feel it in his own chest. He took a deep breath, then reached across the table, not with a contract, not with money, but with an open hand. "Agreed." Lucie looked at his hand, then at his face. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then she took it, shook, and nodded. The pact was sealed, not in ink, but in the silence between them, in the mutual recognition of what they both risked and what they both hoped to gain. The hotel, the city, the world, none of it mattered at that moment. What mattered was the space between them, now filled with possibility, with the promise of something neither could name, but both needed. Hervé did not let go immediately. "You know," he said softly, "you never answered me in French. Not once, these past days." Lucie smiled, not the polite, professional smile of the hotel staff, but a real, private smile. "You never really needed me to." He laughed, quiet, genuine. Perhaps not. They sat together, the morning light warming the space between them. For the first time, there was no tension, no power struggle, no game. Only two people, each fluent in silence, each finally heard. The city outside hummed and moved, indifferent to the small miracle in the lounge of the Hotel Vert de Vie. But for Lucie and Hervé, everything was changed, not because one had won and the other lost, but because for a moment they had both spoken and both listened in a language deeper than words. Their story was just beginning, but it was already rich with risk, with respect, and with the quiet hope that sometimes bridges are stronger than walls.